are you?
I'm Michelle Leonard, and I'm an Interdisciplinary Studies major through Arizona State University, focusing on business and women's studies. In WST 460, I had learned a lot about neoliberalism, which was a brand new term for me, and I remember doing readings about Hurricane Katrina and neoliberalism and chronic homelessness and neoliberalism, and I was really fascinated with this ideology, so I started looking through a lens of neoliberalism in my daily life, and I started thinking about how I could apply it to so many different political and current events. So after the Florida shooting that just happened, I was really thinking about how I could apply the ideology to gun control. I guess I started thinking about why there was so much opposition to gun control in the United States, and because there was this more and more often in the media, you're seeing these school shootings. Why is there still so much opposition to gun control when this is becoming a more and more prominent issue? On February 14th this year, Valentine's Day, there was another school shooting at a high school in Florida, and it killed 17 students. A man named Nicholas Cruz, who was 19, told police that he was responsible for the shooting, and he had been hiding extra ammunition in his backpack and ended up shooting students in the hallways and on the school grounds. He used an AR-15 assault rifle. Oh, wow. So he wasn't a student there, but he arrived at the school by taking an Uber and then took the rifle out of a case and just began shooting in classrooms.
How has this recent shooting affected the topic of gun control?
So anytime there's a school shooting that arises in the media, I find that the issue of gun control just really kind of comes to the forefront of people's minds. And on one hand, you've got people advocating for gun control in response to these school shootings, and then on the other hand, you have so much opposition to gun control. My question was, how does neoliberalism tie into the issue of gun control? If there are so many school shooting victims, and if school shootings are becoming more and more prominent in the media, why are so many people still opposed to gun control? And I really think neoliberalism is an ideology that can shed some light on the topic. So neoliberalism is kind of this umbrella term that explains and gathers together these social policies that have tattered the social safety net in the United States. So it's redistributing the power and resources upward to the wealthy and rich and leaving less and less for the poor. It acts as a way for corporations to make profits while also acting as a form of social control. Basically, neoliberalists want to make the market as free as possible, so that they believe that the government suffocates the economy, so they want to reduce government intervention in the private sector, and actually make it so that the private sector has a say-so in the public sector. So there's less and less government intervention and more private sectors having a say-so in society. There's this idea that what is good for the market is also good for society. And so there's this faith in the free market that it will promote freedom rather than the government intervention. There's a lack of faith in the government to promote freedom. So neoliberalists believe that if everyone is left to their own, they can basically pursue their own destiny and succeed in a capitalist or neoliberalist economy, depending on how much work they put forth. And depending on how much work they put forth, there's going to be a hierarchy that develops, a social order. You could say that is a natural product of the freedom of the free market. There are three main aspects of neoliberalism. The first one is going to be hyper-individualism. Neoliberalists believe that everyone has a personal responsibility to account for themselves in society. So there's this emphasis on personal responsibility rather than social justice. Neoliberalists believe in personalizing social problems. So, for example, neoliberalists believe that homelessness is a result of personal responsibility and a lack of personal responsibility, to be more specific, rather than any sort of structural or societal barriers for marginalized groups. The second aspect of neoliberalism is deregulation, and that refers to deregulating the market. So corporations have more freedom to economically expand and grow. So that would refer to less and less government intervention in the market. And then the third, and really related to that aspect of neoliberalism, is the privatization of public sectors. Public sectors are like our school systems, our prison systems, and neoliberalists call for the privatization of those, which means corporations can come in and start dictating the rules of those public sectors rather than having the government do it. So because corporations are so economically driven and they just want to make money, that's going to be their main goal, and they're not going to provide the same social safety nets that the government would. Now that we have an understanding of neoliberalism, we can look at gun culture through the lens of neoliberalism. So gun culture is really reflective of the neoliberalist, or the aspect of neoliberalism, hyper-individualism. Gun advocates really believe that everyone has a personal responsibility. They believe that everyone should be held responsible for their own personal safety, and there's a lack of faith in the government to be held accountable for people's safety. People opposed to gun control want to actually put guns in teachers' hands, meaning that they believe it is their personal responsibility to protect themselves and their classrooms rather than any sort of government regulations regarding gun control. Gun advocates are also going to believe that they advocate for deregulation. So that means less government intervention in regulating not only their personal lives, but the market itself. And I think a huge part of that is in relation to gun sales. If guns are more controlled and less accessible, gun sales could definitely go down, and that's going to hurt the economy. It's going to prevent the wealthy from getting even wealthier. These big corporation business owners, they're not going to be making as much money. In terms of the privatization of public sectors, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, is a perfect example of how a private corporation can come in and infiltrate the government and reconstruct it through its own corporate lens. So the NRA actually spent over $50 million in political advertisements in the last general election, and they were trying to boost politicians who would support the NRA while targeting Democrats or politicians that were advocating for gun control. So if gun control measures were to be instated, not only would gun sales go down, but the NRA, as a private non-profit corporation, they would lose money too, and they would lose members. The takeaway is that people aren't only opposed to gun control because they feel their personal rights will be taken away, but there is a lot of opposition to gun control, you could argue, because of this neoliberalist ideology that reflects the drive for a free market economy that would allow the wealthy to get wealthier and further reduce the social safety net in the United States.